When I awoke, I discovered myself to be on a ship in the midst of sailing from an unknown location to a strange fictional fantasy country. Upon my arrival to this mysterious nation, I discovered it to be a forested island of beast races, where travelers are expected to walk around drinking psychoactive concoctions and helping people for reasons unknown even to myself. As the boat reached its port town destination, I was asked for my identification. Did I know my name? I didn't, so I made something up. This game was recommended to me by someone who, for as long as we've been friends, has known me to enjoy photography both IRL and, for some reason, in video games too. Intrigued, I did some cursory research, only to discover that it was in fact a world full of Beatrix Potter-esque Victorian anthropomorphized animals, which are the source of my nightmares, apparently. However, my interest in its painting mechanic won the not-so-vicious battle of to play or not to play, and I started up Eastshade, a game that would prove to be at times beautiful in an Elder Scrolls sort of way, and at times polygonal in an Elder Scrolls sort of way. In fact, it is a first-person adventure game with RPG elements that in totality reminded me very much of the Elder Scrolls series. The intro sequence, the musical score, bestial races voiced by the same three voice actors, idyllic force and herb picking, unique architecture, intense atmospheric events, drugs, dreams, cryptic weirdos, secret covens, nationwide cobblestone trade routes with traveling carts willing to black screen you to a city 2 feet away, the lack of a compass, poor and sometimes no quest instructions, pressing Y to jump, and the smattering of lore delivered through stories, letters, and poems littered throughout the world space. These are mostly all elements of many great RPGs, but combined with the particular stylization of this game, the low fantasy and mundane attitude it exudes, give an uncanny resemblance to different parts of the ES series, especially Morrowind and Skyrim, which I found to be a good thing, because I consider the Elder Scrolls games as some of the most relaxing RPGs I've ever played, and in a game about painting, relaxing is sort of what I'm signing on for. After arriving at the island of Eastshade, the player must hike to the nearby town of Lindau with empty pockets, no currency, no map, no directional marker, and limited quest instructions. The formula of a classic adventure game, the developers paved the way for self-discovery. You, the player, must walk to new places, meet new people, have new experiences, and try new things. Or in some games it can feel like the lack of instructions is a way to keep the player playing longer by making things arbitrarily obscured. In this game, it felt more like the freedom to explore. On the island of Vardenfell in Morrowind, the freedom can be intimidating, confusing, and a little dangerous. But on the small, unpeaceful island of Eastshade, it was aptly freeing. On my first day in Lindau, I felt regret. There was a strange monkey creature screeching in my face, and I have a sort of relationship with monkeys not dissimilar to that of our Unstoppables. In Lindau, the player is confined to the port town's limits unless they can pay the troll toll to cross the bridge connecting it to the rest of the island. Like most other games, this beginning region serves two purposes. It provides the developer with a place they can corral the player to learn the game's mechanics, and it serves to demonstrate the tone of the game early on in an effort to convince you to keep playing for however many hours remain. But it wasn't until after Tutorial Town that I began to understand the game's mood or enjoy the quests. In the first quests you experience, you quickly learn that not every quest will require you to paint. This is important as there is no quest marker telling you where to go or what to do, so you need to be able to infer what type of quests the game is asking you to complete. The quests were pleasantly, and surprisingly, varied. Many of them are simple, appearing more complex only by the lack of instructions in your journal. I was never really stumped, but also never bored, because I thoroughly enjoyed the painting mechanic, which I'll touch on later, and I always enjoy themes about helping people. quest types included fetch, delivery, investigation, and fulfilling art commissions, all with unique NPCs and subplots, ultimately delivering droplets of lore that continued painting a broader picture of the fictional world. The world itself was lacking in an element of excitement and wonder. It was beautiful, but I didn't feel like I was adventuring somewhere new, and I think the egregious pop-ins often deflated any sense of awe. It lacked the dynamism that makes exploration interesting. The eclipse rapidly became ordinary, and there were too few spontaneous events, with wildlife spawns being sparse and static, the game state never changing, and the rain-weather pattern being exceedingly rare and possibly scripted. Some of its most interesting and well-crafted elements, prop placement, architecture, and various sentient and non-sentient creatures, were never or rarely the subject of requested paintings. The game is aware of this fact, as demonstrated when it mentions that the famous Navian artist Yevgeny's patrons prefer her landscape paintings to her true passion, abstract art. So when the player begins taking commissions, it too is mainly of landscapes. I'm probably about to commit a faux pas among the RPG community, but I think I wanted radio quests. I think the game would have uniquely benefited from radio quests. Where in a typical RPG, radio quests tend to revolve around fighting randomized enemies in dungeons you've been to 1,000 times. This game had the unique opportunity to request paintings of certain objects and places, perhaps with randomized filters and objectives, to which the player would have had the opportunity to paint them in different ways. They could have even requested paintings of things the game couldn't register, because honestly, who cares? In this respect, the commissions in Nava added a bit of meat to the bones, and were formatted in a way similar to radio quests, except with charming flavor text. The NPCs you meet have some different and some overlapping dialogue options for interacting with them, and as you talk to new characters, you learn new things, which then in turn opens up new dialogue options for NPCs you have already or have yet spoken to, with each NPC having something unique to say about the same dialogue options. This made every named NPC feel like an individual and not Lindau Citizen Number 3. Lindau Citizen Number 3 just stood in front of the stalls all day without a name and refusing to talk to me. But that's okay. I didn't want to listen to his recycled lines anyway. When there are hundreds of NPCs, that doesn't really matter as much, but when you have dozens, it matters a lot. Ultimately, it also gave me the impetus to return to people I'd already spoken to, especially in regards to solving quests. And it was through these unique characters and their weird voices, eccentric personalities, and strange situations that the game's personality really shines. I wonder what kind of brew Yevgeny drinks before creating her art. At the beginning of the game is a small dream sequence where the protagonist dreams of their mother's last wishes. On her deathbed, as though the player is suffering from chronic or circumstantial depression, she urges you to find happiness and inspiration in your life, and asks you to visit her favorite place in the world, Eastshade. She says that while you're there, you should paint some of her favorite spots. This seems to be the genesis of the inspiration mechanic. Each time the player character reaches a new place or has an interesting experience, their soul or something is filled with inspiration, and with that newfound inspiration, they find the will to paint. At least, this is the best understanding I can make of the arbitrary limitations placed on the painting mechanic by the existence of inspiration points. The inspiration mechanic serves the story's themes, either being depression or artistic stimulation, or as I suggest, both. However, it incidentally conflicts with the game's art themes by restricting the player's real-life inspiration to the game's numeric limitations. There were times when I, the player, felt inspired by the world space, and I wanted to engage with the painting mechanic to capture something I personally felt was beautiful. But I had no inspiration in-game because apparently my character did not share those same feelings. There are options for rejuvenating inspiration points. I could explore some more, but there are a definitive number of inspiration points to be earned this way. I could mainline tea that I craft or bought, but I would have to collect 1 billion ingredients for crafting or selling either way. And I could have the same 2 dream sequences at some weird coven, But ultimately, after enough repaints and quests, all of those get fatiguing too. Against Yevgeny's advice, I, on not super rare occasion, created some abstract art. Though it made me question whether Eastshadians truly don't like abstract art, or if I'm simply more talented than Yevgeny, as I found my pieces hung prominently around the island, including this one in the Nava bakery. In any case, I held my hopes out that at the end of the game, the protagonist would have found happiness and inspiration, and see that the world has limitless beauty, allowing me to create limitless paintings. But no such luck. Even if a tad sterile, the world space is very beautiful, with an intriguing level of care and attention given to its prop placement and design. While the main character gets bored easily, only be inspired the first time they ever visit a place, I was constantly inspired to paint each place I visited and a lot of the details within. It wasn't just the Nava skyline that was beautiful, it was delicious-looking loaves of bread and a happy, freaky, but happy monkey skipping around too. I keep drinking ale and smelling flowers, thinking I'll feel something, but I don't. Only tea does it for me anymore. I'm utterly obsessed, addicted now. In the absence of action, puzzles, or other classic challenges to reinforce the gameplay, I respect that the developers made sure the functionality of the painting system worked well, apart from glitches, and that the environment design emphasizes its usage, apart from a poor draw distance and some massive mesh and texture pop-ins. Throughout the journey, there's a sense of progression, of self-sufficiency, freedom, and familiarity that grows as you play the game and as you learn new techniques for painting and acquire new tools for exploration. It is a modest but fun mechanic, and its presence gives the player a tool for appreciating the world they built and conveys the story well. The player is given a lot of control over the creative process of their paintings. They're able to choose the angle, to sleep until the lighting is just right, to drink until the hallucinations are real, and to paint anything they see in the entire game space. The perspective of your shots is limited to the character's ability to crouch and rotate, and doesn't grant the player free-floating control like in Forza Horizon, or accurately simulate the human arm's ability to rotate completely, extend and flex its joints. The camera otherwise does not suffer the same limitations as the camera mechanics in collection-type games, where you typically have to perfectly center the object in frame in order for the game to recognize your capture, like the old Pokemon Snap or Monster Hunter Worlds DLC. And for that, this game gets all of the bonus points. I do appreciate that freedom of perspective, but I found myself longing for more canvas control. This game was suggested to me as a photography game, and while my friend was wrong on that account, he was also kind of right. The filters are created by drinking tea items that basically give you Instagram vision. I found it to be somewhat difficult to judge how much lighter or darker an image would be once painted, which made dark nights and whitewashed mid-afternoons difficult to balance when painting, and the effects of tea were often so overbearing that I was worried about using them in fear of the painting turning out too much of anything, and then having no inspiration left to repaint if it was too much of anything. Where being able to fully remove, add, or change objects seems like an unlikely feature, being able to change filters and their strength at the canvas level would grant the player much appreciated control over their final product, and less frustration from having to mainline each tea to see what would look good, and then either having to reload or make a bunch more for the next time they want to paint. So in addition to perspective, a combination of the Instagram vision and lighting give the player a lot of artistic flexibility in how they want to paint. As I sail away on this ship, the island is slowly disappearing as though it was never there in the first place, but it will always be in my heart. After falling into the game, I couldn't help but start wanting to make all sorts of art, sculptures, wood carvings, or even baked goods. I ended up liking a lot of the paintings I made, even if at times I wished for more control. I don't necessarily consider these longings criticism of the game for lacking these elements, but a sign that I was endeared by the painting mechanics and the fantasy world the studio created, and longed for more of the experience, more versions of the experience. The world was artistically beautiful, but its texture and mesh drop-ins were kind of detrimental to the core aspect of the game, painting beautiful things. And aside from that, there isn't much substance to complement that beauty with quests that built the lore of the world in an often unsophisticated way. Ultimately, Eastshade was just a love letter to art. And maybe a love letter to Morrowind, I'm not really sure. I haven't really ever played a game that was so fundamentally focused around creating art, so I don't really know when I'll have the pleasure of playing something like this anytime in the near future. According to Eastshade Studios' blog, the studio has another game in development that's not related to Eastshade in form or function. Yet in spite of that, I, like many others, am hopelessly hopeful for a sequel.